Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation on response to intervention. This will be the last part of special ed assessment that I talk about in this course, and probably the most important part because response to intervention is a process that affects the regular classroom, specialists, and special ed teachers. So it really runs the whole gamut of practitioners in a school building. And it really is coming to the forefront. And if you are applying for a job, it would behoove you, whether it's a regular ed job or a specialist job or a special ed job, it would behoove you to understand and talk intelligently about response to intervention. And after we get through this presentation, you should be able to do that. So let's look and see what's the problem. And this is a graph that I took from the National Center of Learning Disabilities. And it really is a nice graphic of what the issue really is. Right now, there are 11 million kids that are 13 million kids that are vulnerable, and that includes the purple and the yellow. 11 million kids are Title I. Those are kids from low income and that demographic. And right now there are 2.9 million students with learning disabilities. So that group is what we would consider at risk of. Nearly 3 million kids have learning disabilities, and so there's an overlap of about 667,000 Title I kids. So the problem is we need to identify these kids, and we need to identify them accurately. Is it possible that all those kids in the yellow have learning disabilities? Is it possible that some of those kids in the purple don't have learning disabilities? You can see where it is the overlap there with the kids that are in blue. And the issue is we need to be able to identify those kids accurately, and we need to get kids out of out of LD classification that don't belong there, and we need to stop over identifying them. One of the practices in education that has always baffled me is the way we deal with special education students or students who are struggling. In the past, those who fell behind were often trundled off into a special ed classroom where instead of their instruction being intensified, where there should where there should be more frequent interventions, it's usually slowed down. As a high school principal, I used to cringe when I would go into a resource room and they would be doing homework help with the students. It didn't always happen. Some of my better special ed teachers were actually doing interventions with students, but others were not. And that's part of the problem. And in this graph, which I'm going to show here, it's a percentage of New York State students with disabilities scoring 3 or 4 in math. So you can see, and this is between 2006 and 2007, and you can see in grade 3, 50% of the kids of those special ed kids scored 3 or 4, and in 2007, 57%. So it increased. But you can see here that the percentages are going down as the kids progress through the grade levels. Okay, so these are all different kids naturally, but to me this definitely shows a definite trend that the longer that you stay in special education, the further behind you fall. So you can see that the sum total of comparison between 2006 and 2007 is 30% in 2006 and 37% in 2007 scoring 3 or 4 in math. So that's not good news, and it's not a good trend. It's not only a problem today, but this whole falling behind, waiting to fail is a problem tomorrow as well. The chart I show on the left shows the dropout rate, where nationwide it's a little less than 10%. It's around 20% for minorities, and students with learning disabilities, it's almost 40%. I know I live in Poughkeepsie, which is in wonderful Dutchess County, New York, and the dropout rate is an incredible 40% or more, which I find just incredible. And I know New York City is around the same, 40% figure as well. As I said, nearly 10% of all students drop out of high school. In New York City, it's close to 30%. Minorities, 21.3%, and learning disabilities, almost 40%, which is the reason we need to take action and take it now. This next slide is going to show you what I consider dramatic results of not only research-based core instruction, which is classroom instruction, but how it affects at-risk students who receive research-based interventions. This first graph from the research study shows the progress in reading of low-risk students who were identified in the first grade. So you can see that after 4 years, they were reading on a five-year, 2-month level. This second graph is kids that were identified in the first grade as being high risk on early screening. So this is the progress they made without any core, research-based core or research-based interventions. You can see 2 years, 5 months, almost the kids that were not at risk are almost double. So we're talking here over 2 years in a 4-year span. They've fallen behind. So this next line is what these at-risk kids did with research-based core, but without any extra instructional intervention. So even that is over a half year better than the kids that got nothing. And this is the graph that really impresses me from this research study, is that with research-based core and extra instructional intervention, these kids are at 4 years, 9 months, and almost caught up to the kids that were low risk in screening. So I think it says it all. I don't think we need any more evidence that a research-based core and plus research-based instructional interventions targeted at kids who are at risk based on early screening is almost closes the achievement gap. This next part, which will be the last section of part 1 of my response to intervention presentation, is one of the big ideas. You're going to see it in both Bender and Shores. You're going to see it in Fisher and Fry. I don't believe this is mentioned in Cohen and Spencer, but it might be. IDEA was changed in 2004. It was reauthorized, and as part of that reauthorization, it didn't eliminate this IQ achievement discrepancy model, which I'm about to explain, but it said you don't have to use it to identify students as being learning disabled. So this is a big idea, and I'm going to attempt to explain why it's a big idea. And Fisher and Fry do a good job of it, as well as Bender and Shores. What happens is, in all the time that I was in special ed, I was a special educator for about 15 years, and I chaired many IEP meetings. And in order for a student to be classified as learning disabled, it was pretty simple. You gave them an IQ test, and then you gave them an achievement test in math or achievement test in reading. And if once that gap was determined, the student was identified as learning disabled. So you can see here, I've got this is a bell curve. So this is a normal curve, which certain IQ scores have a frequency, a normal frequency. And most of you know that a normal a normal IQ ranges between 85 and 115. That's between a -1 standard deviation and a +1 standard deviation. So, Dr. Tom is up in, this area up here. But enough about me. Only kidding. I don't know where I am, except I'm sitting on my couch at home right now. That's the normal range of the IQ. So a student was administered an IQ test, then there was an achievement test, and if there was a gap of 2 years or more, okay, what that means is if I have 100 IQ and I'm in the 5th grade, then I should be scoring on the 5th grade on all my achievement tests. If I score on the 3rd grade or below, that's a 2-year discrepancy. Boom. I'm automatically labeled as learning disabled. So, and the problem with that is, think about it. In order for you to be 2 years behind, starting in the 1st grade, you would have to be pre-K, which most assessments don't go that far. If you were in the 3rd grade, then you could be two years behind if you were reading on a 1st grade level and you were in the 3rd grade. Typically, that gap isn't that big yet. So usually it's by the time you're in the 4th or 5th grade. And I've heard stories from students in my classes that talk about family members they've had that ended up dropping out of school because of this wait to fail procedure. By the time a kid is fallen behind that far, usually they're in the 4th, 5th, or 6th grade. They're discouraged. They have a low self-esteem. They hate school, and this is a big issue. It's still being used. Why? The same reason we use standardized tests for accountability purpose. It's quick and it's simple and it's easy. And it's my hope that response to intervention, which I will talk about in the next 2 parts, will eliminate this kind of diagnostic information or procedure. So that's it for the first part. The second part we'll talk about response to intervention specifically, and the third part will be about curriculum-based measurement.